My name is Linda Carter, and if you had met me 2 years ago, you would have thought I was living the picture-perfect Southern dream. I had a pale yellow house with white shutters on a quiet street in Savannah, Georgia, a tidy garden of hydrangeas out front, and a husband who used to be charming enough to fool everyone including me. His name was Mark Carter, and for a long time I believed we were building a life together. We had plans once. We'd save, travel across America, maybe even open a small business. But somewhere along the way, Mark stopped believing in work and started believing that my paycheck could hold up both of us forever. I worked as a real estate consultant, often driving across the city showing homes in the thick Georgia heat. I earned well enough, about $3,000 a month after taxes, and I was proud of that. Mark had lost his job a year earlier when the construction company he worked for closed down, and at first I was sympathetic. Everyone hits a rough patch, I thought. But weeks turned to months, and the man who once woke up early with coffee and blueprints now slept till noon and spent his days scrolling on his phone or sitting in front of the television. When I came home in the evenings, he'd complain about dinner being late, as if my 12-hour workdays were nothing more than a hobby. Still, I tried to keep the peace. I reminded myself that marriage is a partnership. I paid the mortgage, the electricity bills, even his credit card debt, all while he promised that he was just waiting for the right opportunity. Every time I asked what that meant, he'd snap. "You wouldn't understand real work, Linda." It was almost funny, except that it wasn't. Then one muggy afternoon in late June, the air so thick it felt like syrup, Mark dropped the final stone that crushed whatever patience I had left. I had just come home from closing a deal, a small property near Forsyth Park, that earned me a decent commission, and I was looking forward to a quiet dinner. Instead, I found Mark and his mother, Agnes Carter, sitting in the living room as if they'd been waiting for me. Agnes was a tall, thin woman in her late 60s, always dressed as though she were about to attend a garden party in Europe, even if she was only going to the grocery store. Her perfume filled the room before she even spoke. "Linda," Mark said, his tone too casual, too rehearsed. "Mom wants to take a vacation. She's never been to Hawaii." I smiled politely. "That sounds nice. It must be beautiful this time of year." "Yes," Agnes said, folding her hands like a queen. "And since you're the only one bringing in money, you'll pay for it." At first I laughed. I honestly thought they were joking. But then Mark leaned forward, his face hard. "You'll pay for her trip, Linda," he said. "Or you can leave this house." For a moment I just stood there, the words bouncing around my head like echoes in a hollow room. "Excuse me?" I finally managed to ask. "You heard me," he said. "It's your responsibility. You've been keeping your money to yourself while we suffer." Agnes chuckled, the kind of laugh that crawled under your skin. "Yes, dear," she added, "you'll have to pay. Mark's my son, and a wife should support her husband's family. That's what loyalty looks like." The heat outside felt cool compared to what boiled inside me then. I looked at them, Mark slouched on the couch like a spoiled child, and his mother sitting there smugly, and something inside me snapped. But quietly, like a rope giving way after too much strain, I realized that nothing I did would ever be enough. I could work myself to exhaustion, feed them, clothe them, keep a roof over their heads, and they'd still find a way to make me feel small. Without saying a word, I walked to the small oak desk in the corner of the living room. Inside the drawer, beneath a stack of old property brochures, was a thin envelope I had placed there weeks earlier, divorce papers, already filled out, just waiting for a signature. I'd told myself I would use them only if things got unbearable. Apparently, unbearable had just arrived. I turned back toward them, holding the envelope like a fragile piece of truth. "You want me to pay for your mother's trip?" I asked softly. "How about I give you something better instead?" Mark frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "This," I said, and tossed the envelope onto the table between them. The papers slid out, white against the dark wood. "Let's get a divorce." For a moment, neither of them moved. Agnes's laughter stopped mid-breath. Mark blinked as if trying to understand the words. The silence in that room was heavier than any shouting could have been. I could hear the old ceiling fan spinning, the tick of the wall clock, even the sound of my own heartbeat. "You can't be serious," Mark said finally, standing up so fast the couch cushions rose behind him. You're overreacting. I've been underreacting for years, I replied. My voice surprised even me, steady, cold, done. You told me to leave, so I will. But not as your wife. He looked from me to his mother, his mouth opening and closing like he might argue, but there was nothing left for him to say. Agnes tried to recover her authority, smoothing her skirt. Linda, you don't want to make a scene, she said. Think about your reputation. I have, I told her. And that's exactly why I'm leaving. I walked down the hallway, my heels echoing against the wooden floor. Every step felt like peeling away another layer of fear. I went straight to the bedroom, pulled a small suitcase from under the bed, and began to pack. The whole time, Mark followed behind me, alternating between anger and panic. You can't just walk out. Where will you go? What about this house? You'll regret this. I didn't answer. There was nothing to regret except staying as long as I had. I packed my work clothes, my laptop, the photograph of my parents that had always sat on my nightstand. When I zipped the bag shut, it sounded like a door closing forever. As I walked out, I paused at the front door and looked around one last time. The furniture I had bought, the walls I had painted, the life I had tried to build. None of it felt like home anymore. It was just a place filled with memories that didn't deserve to follow me. I hope one day you understand what you lost, I said quietly. Then I opened the door, stepped into the evening air, and left. The sun was setting, painting Savannah in soft orange light. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove toward the small apartment I'd secretly rented on the east side of the city months earlier, a little safety net I'd never told him about. As I drove, I felt something unfamiliar rising inside me, peace. Real, weightless peace. Behind me, in that house that used to be ours, Mark and Agnes were probably still staring at the divorce papers, wondering how the woman who'd paid for everything had finally decided she wasn't for sale. And as the city lights faded in my rearview mirror, I promised myself that from that night on, I would never let anyone put a price tag on my dignity again. The morning after I left that house in Savannah, I woke up in a new bed, in a new city, with a silence so pure it almost frightened me. The little apartment in Charleston, South Carolina, wasn't grand, just a one-bedroom space above a bakery, but to me it felt like freedom wearing a roof. I had rented it quietly months before, a precaution I used to tell myself I'd never need. I'd even furnished it bit by bit, sneaking small pieces of myself there, an old lamp, a framed photograph, my favorite books, each one a seed of independence waiting for the right moment to grow. That morning, as sunlight spilled through the thin curtains, I sat up in bed and realized something. For the first time in years, I didn't have to walk on eggshells. There was no sound of Mark grumbling about breakfast, no smell of his cigarettes drifting from the living room. Just the faint hum of cars outside and the aroma of fresh bread from downstairs. I remember whispering to myself, "This is mine now. My air, my peace." My phone, however, didn't share that peace. It started ringing before 8. The first call was from Mark, then another. Then 10 more after that. I didn't answer any of them. I knew the pattern too well, first anger, then guilt, then sweet talk. It was the same routine he used whenever I tried to stand up for myself. I watched the screen light up again with his name, Mark, husband, and for the first time I edited the contact and deleted that word husband. Just Mark now, nothing more. By noon, he switched to messages. "Linda, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. I was under pressure, you know how my mom is. Please, come home. We can talk. I'll change, I swear. I love you." Each word looked smaller, weaker, emptier. I didn't reply. Instead, I made myself coffee and sat by the window, watching people walking below, ordinary strangers living ordinary lives, and I envied them for how simple they seemed. By afternoon, he turned desperate. "You're ruining everything, Linda. You'll regret this. I can't live without you." But the truth was, he couldn't live without my money. That was what this had always been about. Every month I earned around $3,000 and he spent it faster than I could save it, on beer, poker nights, and those endless investments that never existed. I used to cover for him, telling friends he was just going through a rough patch. Now I realized the only rough patch was the one I'd been living in. That evening I went for a walk by the Charleston waterfront. The city was alive with the golden hush of sunset sailboats drifting lazily, families laughing, tourists taking photos near the pier. I felt like a ghost among them, both invisible and reborn. I found a quiet bench and sat down, the soft sea breeze brushing my face. I took out my phone again and finally opened Mark's last message. "You'll be back?" "You always come back," I smiled sadly. "Not this time," I whispered, and turned off the phone completely. That night, I unpacked properly for the first time. I lined up my clothes in the tiny wardrobe, placed my favorite candle on the knitstand, and hung a painting of the Brooklyn Bridge I'd bought years ago in New York. I'd always loved that bridge, strong, beautiful, and unshaken by storms. Maybe that's what I wanted to become now. The next morning, I went to the First Federal Bank of Charleston and opened a new account under my maiden name, Linda Harris. It felt symbolic, like reclaiming the person I was before marriage turned into a slow suffocation. I transferred what savings I had left, $15,400, and promised myself I'd rebuild from there. When the teller smiled and said, "Anything else I can do for you today, Miss Harris?" I almost cried. Miss Harris, not Mrs. Carter, not Mark's wife. Just me. For the next few days, I lived quietly. I worked remotely for my real estate clients, caught up on old projects, and even started jogging in the mornings. It was strange how quickly peace became addictive. I'd wake up before sunrise, lace my shoes, and run along the cobbled streets as the city slowly came alive. The air smelled of coffee and salt water, and every breath reminded me that I'd survived something that once felt impossible to escape. But Mark wasn't done trying. One afternoon, I came home from work to find a note slipped under my apartment door. I recognized his handwriting, immediately slanted, rushed. "Linda, I can't eat, I can't sleep. Please let me see you. We can fix this. I'll do anything." He'd underlined anything twice. I folded the note and placed it in a drawer, right next to the divorce papers I had mailed to him the day before. He'd soon learn that anything came too late. A week later, Agnes called. I don't know how she got my number, but her voice was still the same sharp, cold, controlling. "Linda, this is childish," she said. "Marriage isn't a game. You can't just walk away every time things get tough." "Things didn't get tough," I replied calmly. "They got toxic. You'll destroy Mark," she hissed. "He destroyed himself," I said, and hung up. I blocked her number after that. It felt good, one more tie cut, one more chain gone. Still, there were nights when loneliness crept in, whispering doubts in the quiet corners of my heart. I would sit on the couch with a cup of tea, wondering if I'd been too harsh, if maybe I could have handled things differently. But then I'd remember the look on Mark's face when he ordered me to pay for his mother's trip, the laughter that followed, and the years of disrespect that had chipped away at my self-worth. And the doubt would vanish. About 3 weeks after I left, I heard through a mutual friend that Mark had tried to apply for unemployment benefits and was now behind on rent. Apparently, he'd even pawned his watch, the one I bought him for our 5th anniversary. I should have felt sorry for him, but all I felt was distance. His life was no longer mine to fix. That evening, I poured myself a glass of California wine, turned on some soft jazz, and looked around my small apartment. The walls still smelled faintly of paint, and the hum of the city below reminded me that life keeps moving whether we're ready or not. I wrote in my journal, "Today I learned that peace doesn't arrive with a man's apology. It arrives the moment you stop waiting for one." And when I closed that journal, I knew that chapter 1 of my life, the chapter of compromise, fear, and silence, was truly over. The next day, I began searching for a new home, not just a place to stay, but a place that would carry my name on the deed and no one else's. I didn't know where yet, maybe North Carolina, maybe somewhere by the sea, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never again depend on someone who couldn't stand on their own feet. When I locked my apartment door that night, the sound of the bolt sliding into place felt final, comforting, powerful. The door behind me, the one that led to Mark, his mother, and the woman I used to be, was closed for good. And this time, I didn't need to look back to make sure. 6 months after I left Charleston, I found myself standing in front of a little 2-story white house in Wilmington, North Carolina. It wasn't grand or expensive, but to me, it looked like a castle built out of second chances. The paint on the porch rail was peeling a little, the front yard had wild grass, and one of the shutters hung loose, but when I saw it, I knew instantly this was where my new life would begin. The real estate agent, a kind woman named Monica Turner, smiled as she handed me the keys. "It's all yours now, Linda," she said. "Congratulations." I looked at the house again, my chest tight with something between joy and disbelief. I had bought it with my own savings, $120,000 I'd worked for through years of showing homes to others, all while watching my own marriage crumble. And now, for the first time, I was holding the deed to something that belonged entirely to me. No shared names, no silent debts, no one waiting to use me. Just me. That night, I carried my last box inside and sat on the bare wooden floor of the living room. I didn't even have furniture yet, just a sleeping bag, a few dishes, and my laptop, but I didn't care. The house smelled faintly of old pine and freedom. I listened to the quiet creaks of the walls, the soft hum of the night outside, and I thought to myself, this is mine. Every brick, every breath. The next morning, I woke up early to sunlight flooding through the windows. I made coffee in a borrowed mug and sat on the porch steps, watching the world wake up. Kids rode their bikes down the street, a mail truck rumbled by, and an elderly neighbor waved from across the road. His name was Mr. Jennings, and he told me he'd lived there for 40 years. "Good to see some life back in that house," he said kindly. "It's been empty too long," I smiled. "It won't be empty anymore," I told him. And I meant it. Over the next few weeks, I poured myself into making the place feel alive. I painted the walls a soft cream color, planted roses in the yard, and bought second-hand furniture from local shops. Every nail I hammered, every box I unpacked felt like a piece of healing. I played music while I worked, old country songs, some soft jazz, and I danced barefoot across the floor, laughing at how light I felt. It was strange to rediscover happiness in such small, ordinary moments. My work life also started to bloom again. I had taken a few clients in Wilmington and slowly built up a new list of buyers. One couple, the Millers, told me they trusted me because I sounded like someone who knew how to start over. They were right. I did. Then one quiet Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. When I looked at the screen, I froze. It was Mark. I hadn't heard from him in months. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, or maybe closure, got the better of me. "Linda," his voice cracked through the line. "Please. I need to see you." My stomach tightened. "What do you want, Mark?" I messed up," he said, his voice trembling. "I lost everything. The house, my car. Mom's in a nursing home now, and I don't have anywhere to go." I didn't say anything. "I'm sorry, Linda," he continued. "I really am. I didn't realize how much I hurt you until you were gone. You were right. I used you. I thought you'd always be there to fix things." I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. Part of me wanted to scream, part of me wanted to hang up, but mostly, I felt tired of his words, tired of the cycle of apologies that meant nothing. "Mark," I said softly, "I hope you find peace, but I'm not your answer anymore," he sniffed. "I don't want money, I swear. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." "Then you've said it," I replied, and ended the call. That night, I sat by the window, watching the moonlight spill across my new living room floor. For the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. Just a deep, quiet relief. The kind that comes when you finally stop trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. A week later, I learned from a neighbor in Savannah, an old friend named Elena, that Mark had been seen wandering the streets near our old home.
He had sold everything he owned, trying to get by.
People whispered that he was sleeping on park benches, living off handouts. I didn't celebrate it, but I couldn't pity him either. We all live with the choices we make, and his choices had led him exactly there. Meanwhile, my world was growing brighter. I started hosting small gatherings at my house, coffee mornings with Monica, dinners with new friends from work, quiet evenings reading on the porch. The house that had once been silent now echoed with laughter, music, and the warmth of good company. One Sunday morning, I stood in the garden, pruning the roses I'd planted, when Mr. Jennings came by with a basket of peaches from his tree. "You've really made this place yours," he said, smiling. "It looks like happiness moved in." I laughed. Maybe it did. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter to myself. It wasn't long, just a few lines to remind me of how far I'd come. Dear Linda, remember this feeling. The quiet, the peace, the safety of being your own person. You rebuild yourself from nothing but courage. Don't ever hand your life to someone who doesn't value it again. I folded the note and tucked it inside a kitchen drawer. Some promises are meant to be written, not spoken. Months passed, and with every sunrise, I felt more like myself, or maybe someone new entirely. I started saving again, this time not for someone else's dreams but for my own. I even began thinking about opening a small interior design business, helping others find beauty in new beginnings. The idea thrilled me. Sometimes when I sat on the porch at dusk, I'd think about the journey from that toxic house in Savannah to the quiet apartment in Charleston, and finally to this little home in Wilmington. Every step had been painful, but necessary. Like shedding old skin. One evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, I whispered to myself, "You did it, Linda." And I realized something simple yet profound. Peace doesn't arrive with grand gestures or second chances. It arrives when you stop asking for permission to be happy. That house, my house, wasn't just walls and windows. It was proof that I could survive betrayal, rebuild from nothing, and still create something beautiful out of brokenness. And as the wind rustled the roses outside, I smiled to myself, knowing that for the first time in my life, I was home. It had been a year since I bought my little house in Wilmington, and sometimes I still woke up expecting to hear Mark's voice or the sound of his mother's shrill laughter echoing down the hallway of that old Savannah house. But then I would open my eyes and see the soft blue walls I had painted myself, the sunlight streaming through the curtains I'd chosen, and I'd remember that life was gone. I was free. Freedom, though, isn't something that arrives all at once. It comes in waves, sometimes fierce and wild, sometimes quiet and soft. That year taught me that. There were days when I laughed easily, and days when the past tried to creep back in through the cracks. But every morning I reminded myself that I had built this peace with my own two hands. By spring, my interior design business, which I had named Second Chance Interiors, began to grow. I started small, helping friends, staging houses for local real estate agents, transforming dull spaces into homes that breathed warmth again. Then, word spread. People liked not just my work but my story. Clients told me they could feel something real in my designs. I never told them the truth, that the something real was pain turned into purpose, but I think they sensed it anyway. Soon, I was making more than I ever did in my real estate job. I earned around $5,000 a month, sometimes more. For the first time, money felt like a tool of independence, not a leash someone else could pull. I even started saving for travel, something I'd always dreamed of doing but never dared when I was with Mark. That summer, I booked a solo trip to Seattle, Washington, determined to see the ocean from a new corner of America. I remember stepping off the plane and feeling the crisp northern air wrap around me like a new beginning. The city was nothing like Savannah or Charleston. It was busier, louder, more alive. The streets buzzed with people carrying coffee cups and big dreams, and I loved it instantly. I rented a small room near Pike Place Market, overlooking the bay. Every morning I walked along the pier, watching fishermen throw nets into the cold, gray water. I bought fresh flowers from the market and filled my room with color. And every evening I stood by the ocean, watching the sunset melt into gold across the horizon. It was there, with the wind brushing against my face and the waves whispering below, that I realized something important. Life gives second chances, but only when you take the first brave step yourself. One night, as I sat on the pier eating clam chowder from a paper cup, I saw a young couple arguing nearby. The woman's voice was trembling. The man looked angry, defensive. I watched her lower her head, her shoulders curling inward like she was trying to disappear. And in that moment I saw myself, the version of me that used to stay quiet to keep the peace. I wanted to walk up to her, to take her hand and tell her, "You don't have to stay," but I didn't. I just sent her silent strength across the water and hoped she'd find her way like I did. When I came back home to Wilmington, I felt like a new person. I bought a small golden retriever puppy and named him Charlie. He became my little shadow, following me around the house, curling up by my feet while I worked, wagging his tail like joy itself. The first night I brought him home, I sat on the porch with him in my lap, looking up at the stars. "It's just us now," I whispered. "And that's enough." Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Some evenings, when the rain tapped gently against the windows, I would cook myself dinner, roasted vegetables, a little pasta, a glass of California red wine, and play soft music. Sometimes I'd dance with Charlie, laughing at myself. Other nights, I'd read books about women who built lives from the ashes of old ones, and I'd think, I know exactly how that feels. One morning, while checking my emails, I saw a message that froze me for a second. It was from Mark. The subject line said only, "Please read this." I hesitated. My first instinct was to delete it to protect my peace, but curiosity won. I opened it. "Linda, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry, truly sorry. I know I ruined everything good we had. I've been trying to get clean, find work, start again. I'm living in a shelter in Columbus, Ohio, and every day I think about how badly I treated you. I don't want money or anything. I just wanted to say that I finally understand what you meant when you said you were done saving me. I hope you're happy, you deserve it. Mark." I sat there reading it over and over. There were no tears this time, only a quiet understanding. Maybe people really can change, but only after losing everything they took for granted. Still, his healing wasn't my responsibility. I replied simply, "I wish you peace, Mark. Take care." Then I closed the laptop and went outside. The air smelled like rain and roses. I realized I didn't feel anger or sadness or pity, just closure. That chapter was finished. A few months later, my business took off in ways I'd never imagined. I hired 2 assistants, both young women just starting their careers, and told them what no one had told me. Always keep your own bank account, your own dreams, and your own name. We laughed. But I meant every word. By the end of that year, I had enough saved to buy a small beach cottage in Cape May, New Jersey, my weekend retreat. Standing there one evening, the Atlantic wind in my hair, I realized how far I'd come. From being the woman who paid for everyone else's comfort to the woman who finally learned to invest in her own. Now, when people ask me if I ever miss my old life, I smile and say, not for a second. I didn't lose a husband. I found myself. And that is worth more than all the dollars or pounds I will ever earn. Sometimes I still think of the night I walked out of that Savannah house with just a suitcase and courage. I didn't know then where I'd end up. I just knew I couldn't stay. And that decision, that moment of saying no more, became the foundation of everything beautiful that followed. Now, when I wake up in my Wilmington home, sunlight spilling across the floor, Charlie wagging his tail beside me, I whisper a quiet thank you, not to anyone else, but to the woman I became when I finally chose myself. That is the life I chose. And I would choose it again, every single time.